Good morning. I'd like to say hello to everyone. It's morning for me in California, but I know we have people all over the world watching us. So good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series that is promoted by the U.S. Spiritist Federation, and we do it every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm happy to be here and host this talk that we presented by Luiz Villaça, who'll be leading our live with the team, the Spirits World Part 2. So he actually did this presentation a couple of weeks ago, the Part 1, and now we'll be leading to his Part 2. We were just talking before we went live, and he said he has a lot of information to share with us today. But before we introduce Luis here, I'd like to take a brief moment to announce two different programs that have been led by the U.S. Spiritist Federation. The first one is called the Initiation to Spiritism. It's a virtual course, and it happens on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And this course is meant for people who want to learn more about Spiritism, understand the basic principles of Spiritism, getting initiated. So it's a great course for people that are starting with Spiritism. And the second announcement that I would like to make is that we're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the U.S. Spiritist Federation, and it will be celebrated at our 16th U.S. Spiritist Symposium, which will be hosted in Houston, Texas, in November 5th. And the theme for this particular time is time for renewing, healing, and regrowth. And the symposium is an event for the whole family. I actually had a chance to participate in a couple of those, and it was always like a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people, and plus you learn a lot about Spiritism. It's really a magical moment where you are able to reconnect yourself. So one more thing before, and I know you guys are probably anxious to jump into the presentation here. I'd like to mention that on the screen, you're going to see a QR code. And if you want to help the U.S. Spiritist Federation to produce more publications or to promote Spiritism in general, please scan the QR code, and we will really welcome your donation. So back to Luis here. Hey, Luis, it's very good to have you here with us today. And so we're going to be talking about the spiritual world, which, like I said, you have done this a couple of weeks ago. And before I pass the ball here to Luis, I would like to mention Luis is an electronic engineer, and he has a master's degree from Carnegie-Mellon University and also an MBA from Manchester University. He's also a worker at Grupo Fraterno, a spiritist center in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he labors on the mediumistic meetings and also teaches classes on Spiritism. So let's also take this opportunity to send your questions. There's a Q&A button there. Sorry, it's by using the chat window. And Luis has reserved some time at the very end of the presentation to address your comments and questions. So without further ado, Luis, it's all you.
Thank you, Claudio. It's a pleasure to be here. Good of you to make this introduction. I'm getting out of a cold, so you must understand that I might sneeze or cough or whatever. Hello, Cordeiro. It's good to see you here. Cordeiro has been a colleague of mine from college. Just to remind you, what we are doing here today is a journey. We're going to go together exploring together insights about the spirit world. Most of us don't remember the spirit world. We were there before, but we don't remember. So what we know about it has to do with communications from errant spirits, from spirits that are not incarnated at the time they tell us what they are doing. Probably that is the largest body of knowledge that we have access to, but it could include also inspired works by incarnates and also recollections from incarnates that were either emancipated from their body, or remember errant spirits. That happens. But we're going to journey together through mostly books. And we start with this beautiful picture here of the Trinity College Library. That's, to inspire our journey. So let's go about it. And by the way, let me remind you of my notation. Whatever is in italics is being a direct reproduction from a book, word by word. Sometimes skipping parts. All my slides are referenced, so you can go back there and check me out. Whatever is not in italic, like the former slide, is a comment by me or a summary or just information, okay? So let's continue our journey that we started 2 weeks ago, seeing more work by André Luiz. Now we'll go and visit his Between Heaven and Earth book. So somewhere in the middle of the book, chapter 8, and this is just to warm us up, we have Antonina, who is sleeping in an emancipation of the soul experience. She goes and meet André Luiz and meet Clarencio, and we will know, and Horacio, if I'm not mistaken, and we will know why shortly. But before we know why, Antonina asks Clarencio, why don't we have a living memory of our previous lifetimes? This is something we always ask. Wouldn't it be blessed happiness to consciously meet again those who we love the most? If we could recognize our former loved ones, we could see the faces and recognize them, wouldn't that be great? And Clarencio answers, contacting the best ones, would entail contacting the worst ones too. And inarguably, we haven't yet acquired balance and pure love that would allow us to do that, well. But the point here is, and he continues, our spirit makes notes of all steps of our journey. So we might not remember everything, neither incarnated or when we discarnate from this life. But he tells us, eventually we will recover every aspect of what we have been through in our multiple lives. So we go and learn things. Later on, André Luiz gathers Antonina and with Clarencio, etc., and they go to a place. That's our preamble. And when they get there, and this is in the spirit world, so we are learning about the spirit world, they found hundreds of laughing children that were playing among springs and flowers in a marvelous garden. This is a spirit world, guys. Children. And the instructors say, this is Lar da Bênção, an important educational colony, a combination of school for mothers and a home for little ones, for children that have discarnated as children. A number of sisters, of mothers from Earth, while incarnated, come here to visit their discarnate child. Isn't that something that warms our heart to know of the possibility that this is happening? It reminds me of friends who lost children, and oh boy. Anyway, and it goes on. And Marcus, the son that discarnated, finds Antonina, and they hug, etc. But they were also looking for Julio, another child, that had discarnated. And they are told, little Julio is not here. He's still suffering abnormalities that keep him from living with his happy children. He is at the home of Sister Blondina. So we keep learning about the spirit world. People have homes, as we know, and we've seen in part 1, and Sister Blondina is one of them, and she's helping Julio. And let's go to Sister Blondina. And interesting part, Hilario, who is a guy who's accompanying them, actually, this image is from Projeto Imagem. It's a work by a devout spiritist that generates, foils, illustrations of books. And so this is the illustration of this particular book, and I picked a few images to illustrate my presentation. So we have here the little Julio, Clarencio, André Luiz, or Hilario, and Blondina. And Hilario says, such discarnates, children, have been taught to immediately resume their adult personage. And that's an often seen, doubt. What happens to children who discarnate? Do they, become adults very, very fast in the ethereal world? Do they remain as children? So Hilario asks, well, I thought they would almost immediately become adults. And Blondina tells him, a lot of times, that's what actually happens. Children discarnate, and they recover an adult image and perispirit. When the spirit has reached an elevated evolutionary level and has assumed mental comment of itself, is when this happens. But she goes on, however, the same does not apply for most children that discarnate. So what she's telling us is, most children of, earth level do not become adults when they discarnate. They are still prisoners of unconscious automatisms and are a long way from self-governance. That's why we cannot do without the recovery time needed for someone who has left the physical vehicle, who has discarnated in the infancy. So most children, when discarnate, they remain children in the spiritual world. Were you aware of that? With this preamble, we move to a different book. This is one of 2 books that I am introducing to you in this set of 2 talks that are not yet in English. Actually, talking to Jussara of the United States Spiritist Federation, she told me that this book has actually been translated, but they were never able to publish it. I find it a very moving book. It's about a single communication of a single spirit that has happened through Chico Xavier in 1975. Let me give you some context here. Marcos, who is the spirit who will communicate, was a 12-year-old boy who was in a car with his 2 siblings, João, 11 years old, and Sheila, 7 years old. They were traveling with a friend, Maria, and they went in a day trip somewhere. And on their way back, they had an horrible accident. And the 4 of them passed away. The 4 of them discarnated in this accident. As you can imagine, the parents were mortified. They were all of Japanese ascendance. You can see their last names there. And they were not spiritists, but, the mother was, what's the word for that? Was directed by a friend to seek Chico Xavier for some consolation. She actually went to Uberaba 3 times. On the first 2 times, no communication came. On the 3rd time, on December 12, 1975, 10 months after his death, Marcos sent a communication. That is, this book, essentially, chapter 5, if my memory doesn't fail me. I've used the illustrations of the book. They were not drawn by Marcos, they were drawn by a professional artist. And I picked up excerpts of the book here, okay? I had to translate it. I did my best. So I'm going to read what Marcos said. My dear mommy, my dear daddy, I am obeying my grandfather Joaquim, who brought me here to write. We are like on a direct telephone line in which the pencil line is forming my words without me being able to receive the words of my dear parents at the same time. Since I woke up here, I have heard your cries from the heart, your words that are not spoken, your prayers of affliction in silence, and your tears that no one on earth sees. But I ask you, in the name of our little Sheila of João Batista, and in my name, to live, and live with faith in our reunion. We are all united without my knowing how. The thought is a force, but I don't know yet how to explain what I feel. We are, Marcos tells her, in a playground of children who came here in a hurry. We have treatments, exercise lessons, and lots of affection. Many grown-up children help the younger ones, and there are assistants and are assistants to dear nurses who support us as children of the heart. We have repose, but the repose is pierced by memories that are as vivid as if they were colorful, still lightning bolts in our recollections. On these screens of the soul, we see what is happening at a distance. And furthermore, your voices, little mother, reach us by all means. I ask you, you who are our dear guardian angel, to hand over to God the events of February when he discarnated. Weep no more with discouragement and affliction. Discouragement and affliction, sorry. Here we have many people dedicated to good. Sister Louisa blesses us, a benefactress I never met, and a saint, whom we should call Brother Ukuru, surround us with much love every day. Uncle Diogo and Grandfather Joaquim are companions who do everything to help us. Of Aunt Maria is the lady who was with them in the car crash and also discarnated at the time. Of Aunt Maria, I know nothing. I ask about her, but all I get is the news that she's doing well. As a parenthesis, this sister Louisa, she is believed to be a friend of the family who discarnated many years before. And Diogo is the brother of Joaquim, so he is the aunt grandfather of Marcus and his siblings. Going on. In a way, I am still not quite myself. My head is so afflicted, like someone who hasn't come out of a very big scare. I can't remember that veraneio very well, nor our house in Perus. Veraneio was the model, is a General Motors car manufactured in Brazil. It was the model of the car that hit them and caused the accident. And he goes on, an emotion rises up in my brain that makes me dizzy. But Grandpa Joaquim tells me that everything will get better when you and Dad are stronger. I can't go on. Mom, bless the children that are here without you, but always counting on you to make us stronger. God will help us. Today, I have more faith. On behalf of the brothers and in my name, I leave you at home with our kiss of respect and love. Marcos Uberaba, December 12, 1975. A lot to learn here. Another testimony that there are gardens where children that discarnate are being taken care of. Very similar to what, in a very similar environment to what they have here. Also, it's very clear that they can hear and feel the feelings of those who they left behind, and also that this is not good. So while incarnated, we should learn that we must not bother them with our feelings of loss. They must continue on. But I love this book. I found it great, and it gives so many insights on discarnated children. As a preamble to our next book, this comes from the Center for Spiritist Studies and Research of Curitiba. Curitiba is the capital of state of Paraná in Brazil. And they share with us. It's interesting to note that André Luiz's first book caused great impact because of the novelty of its information. Some even contesting his description of a spiritual life very similar to the one we lead on earth. The curious thing is that similar descriptions already existed from the early days of modern spiritualism, but they had fallen into oblivion. They had been forgotten. One of these cases is what Andrew Jackson Davis has reported to us around 1850s, the beginning 1820, 1840 something, okay? So let's peruse, that's a very good word. Let's check out some of Andrew Jackson Davis's accounts. I'm beginning here with Arthur Conan Doyle reports on Andrew Jackson Davis. Arthur Conan Doyle, as you probably know, was a very famous, very important non-fiction and fiction writer. And many of the fiction books that he wrote had that famous personage, Sherlock Holmes, and his assistant, Watson. But here is a non-fiction book about spiritualism. It's called History of Spiritualism. And in chapter 3, he talks about Andrew Jackson Davis. Andrew Jackson Davis, according to him, was a remarkable man. He was born in New York in the banks of the Hudson of an uneducated family. He was feeble in body and starved in mind. Arthur Conan Doyle's words. He reported having had only one book until he was 16 years old. One book. And he had such spiritual forces behind him that when he was 20, he had written, actually he dictated this book, one of what, according to Doyle, was one of the most profound and original books of philosophy ever produced. This book was The Principles of Nature. And I'm going to go through some of the things that Andrew Jackson Davis has shared with us in 1840-something about the spirit world. In his spiritual vision, David saw an arrangement of the universe which closely corresponds with what afterwards has been taught to us by the spirits. And this is Doyle telling us on his perspective in 1920s. So after 1920s, we have so many other reports by spirits, and they are all very similar, and that's the journey we're doing together. So Andrew Jackson Davis saw a life in the spirit world that resembled that of Earth, with pleasures and pursuits that would appeal to our natures. That by no means our nature was changed by that. Perceive the similarity? He saw study for the studious, congenial tasks for the energetic, art for the artistic, beauty for the lover of nature, rest for the weary ones. This is so different. Like 10 days ago, I was listening. I was in a religious event, and the guy said, when we go to the spirit world, we stay in contemplation. That's so different from all that we have seen in the reports and the accounts of the spirits. We are not in contemplation. We are working hard and going on with the things that we want to do. Remember Countess Paula in last presentation? But let's move on Andrew Jackson Davis. He saw graduated phases of spiritual life through which one slowly rose. It's the same. These spheres he pictured as concentric rings around the world, around Earth. The object of life was to qualify for advancement. And the best method to qualify for advancement was to get away from sin, from doing bad things. Especially those blemishes that have to do with the permanent spirit. This was before the codification. So consistent, isn't it? The next passage is from a book by Andrew Jackson Davis, actually from the Great Harmonia, Volume 1. The Great Harmonia originally had 6 volumes. They have been condensated in one thick one. But in this one volume, the chapter, The Philosophy of Death. And so that you keep me honest, no, wrong book. Okay, now, correct book. This is the Great Harmonica, a philosophical revelation of the natural, spiritual, and celestial universe. So if you guys are interested, you can find this on the internet. As I mentioned before, part of my motivation here is to have you guys study and read and go out to new sources and build your knowledge. It's here, it says 1850 something, I believe. Anyway, I don't have the exact date of publication, but I can show you the original book. But from that chapter, he tells us, he's talking about an experience that he had while a woman was discarnating. And he was a visual medium. He saw the spirits and he could see her perispirit using our nomenclature. So, our current nomenclature. So, let's read what he put in Great Harmonia. I saw her pass, after discarnating, I saw her pass through the adjoining room, out of the door, and step from the house into the atmosphere. Immediately upon her emergement from the house, his words, she was joined by 2 friendly spirits from the spiritual country. And after tenderly recognizing and communing with each other, the 3, in the most graceful manner, began ascending obliquely through the ethereal envelopment of our globe. The air. They walked so naturally and fraternally together that I could scarcely realize the fact that they trod in the air. They seemed to be walking on the side of a glorious but familiar mountain. I continued to gaze upon them until the distance shut them from my view. From the codification, we know that there is, most of us will experience a period of perturbation after we discarnate. We'll be unconscious. And as well, we know from other accounts that most of us will have difficulty moving. But isn't it interesting? I wonder, when we discarnate, we will be received by people that we love, that love us, and will we be able to immediately after it walk with them to somewhere in the spirit world? Isn't that neat? Oh well. Back to the codification. There's a full chapter on the Spirit's book about the spirit life. Go back there, reread it. You'll find things that you probably don't remember that were said there. Anyway, one of the things there in questions 223 and 224 has to do with when will we incarnate again after we become errant spirits. Kardec tells us, the spirits through Kardec tell us, that those intervals between incarnations last from a few hours to thousands of centuries. Oh boy. Strictly speaking, there's no outside limit assigned to the errant state. I don't know, from what we hear in mediumistic meetings and from what we read from books, uh, I don't remember any account that's over, a few centuries, but thousands of centuries, that's scary, isn't it? But never forever. Our errant periods will never last forever. Sooner or later, a spirit always has the opportunity to begin another existence. Now we skip to a fairly recent book. I want to present you new stuff, new books. I want to get you guys curious. This is another book by Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, psychographed by Divaldo Franco. It's available in English. It was published around 2020, barely 2 years ago. It's called On the Way to a World of Regeneration. The text that I present here is my translation because I do not have access to the original English translation. There's no Kindle edition, and I couldn't get the book here in Brazil. So you bear with my translation. I skip to chapter 13. Actually, the book, just so that you have, a feeling for the book, has 2 parts. First part has to do with the pandemic, and they go down in a row to earth in a work group, Manoel Philomeno de Miranda with others, to help, including Eurípides Barçanufo, to help in the COVID pandemic. So they work with the recent incarnated. They do a lot of work there in the spirit. I don't know how to say that in English. Anyway, eventually they will go to a second task, and the second task is a work group. Actually, a task force would be a better. Is a task force to help in a group dislocation of spirits from the proximity of Earth to the proximity of somewhere else, probably a more primitive world. So, hey guys, aren't you curious? Go there and read it. Anyway, from chapter 13, a few details. Eurípides Barçanufo is explaining to Manoel Philomeno de Miranda and others that one, when discarnated and when he gets to the spirit world, his unconscious models the image, the perispirit, his form, with which one form he was most familiar, the one he liked best, on the one in which he was best known. My friend João usually say that we tend to have the form like 40, 50 years old, independently of the fact that we might discarnate, 90 or whatever. And he goes on. This particular spirit he's talking about discarnated as a child, but in the afterlife, the vast majority of those who discarnated as a child, his words, different from the other book, develops as if they were in the physical body, meaning they grow up. So it's not different. They grow up in the spirit world. And later, when affections, for instance, mother, father, go to find them, they take the form in which they discarnated. They look to their parents as if they were younger, the same way they looked when they discarnated, so that they can be recognized, not the form that they had been using. Interesting, isn't it? One more interesting thing. Another explanation on the same chapter. Note that a person like myself who was nearsighted or who had any other problems that required glasses or other equipment, after that, when I discarnate, the spirit no longer needs them because the problem is organic. However, I might be so adapted to the use of this that I keep using these instruments, although they are no longer needed. So, if we meet later after we discarnate, you might find me with glasses, even though I don't need them, because I'm used to them and they are part of myself. Isn't that neat? During the book, while they were, helping in the COVID pandemic, they were summoned to a large, important meeting in a colony in the Amazon. And I wanted to describe to you his account of arriving at this colony. So, when arriving at this chosen place, this particular colony, we were awestruck by the beauty and brilliant colors, as well as by the movement of spirits and collective vehicles, buses, in the full splendor of the forest seen from above. So he is reporting of a colony in the Amazon with similar characteristics of other spiritual colonies that we have been told about by other spirits. There are collective vehicles, and he goes on. There were smaller buildings distributed in a rectangular shape. Before this, he talks about a very large square building. His driver explained that this community was responsible for the life in the forests of the region. So we have spiritual communities over there, and they seem to be very similar. You see how the reports are alike. Later on, now in chapter 15, when they are preparing for the task force of relocating a group of spirits to a different planet neighborhood, he tells about it. They had the possibility of visiting caves. Those caves are in the spiritual world, where the so-called justice maker spirits took refuge. I'm using the same expression that the official translation of this book, On the Way to the World of Regeneration, Laurie, uses. I don't think that would be the best translation. Probably it's closer to vigilante spirits than to justice maker spirits, but I'm going to go with justice makers at this time. And he's telling about a preparation meeting. In the morning, in our work area, he's not there yet. He's in another colony, another place, in a preparation meeting. We gathered as if we were in a business meeting, in a meeting room. And the mentor presented a careful plan of the said community. The name given to the community is the City of Justice. The whole community is going to be relocated. And he goes on. Through a projector on screen, this is a spirit world, guys. Through a projector on screen, we watched fascinated, vivid drawings of the location and, at the same time, movement that gave life to beautifully delineated graphics As I mentioned before, there is technology in the spirit world, advanced technology, as we have seen in many other books. The huge swamp, the very special projection was impressive, as if we were there in the hostile region. Probably something like a heavily animated graphics like in current or best than current video games. Isn't that neat? Claudio, isn't that neat? And I had to bring to you this section of the book. So he's telling what he's seeing in the projector in the meeting room. So he sees oversized birds of scavenging habits flying around, calling menacingly in a shadowy region where no sunlight penetrated. Shapeless beings, hairy biotypes, prowled around. His words, it's likely that in Dante Alighieri's extraordinary work, Virgilio had led the poet in partial unfolding, emancipation of the soul, unfolding, same thing, through sleep, to a similar region on the face of the earth, which holds considerable numbers in different parts of the planet, giving rise to the tenebrous concept of hell. Neat theory, isn't it? My theory, if you watch the first part, was that Virgilio might have had inspiration, and his work, Divine Comedy, was the result of an inspiration. Here, Manoel Philomeno de Miranda say otherwise. Dante Alighieri, in an Emancipation of the Soul experience, had Virgilio take him by hand to the circles of hell. Isn't it a neat image as well? By the way, I didn't want you to bring more Botticelli. So this is an image. It's in the National Library of Paris, called Inferno. Is another vision of the Dante's Divine Comedy's Inferno. And do that. So you can see here, he was an illuminator, by the way. This image is sort of small. It's part of a book. It's deteriorated in down here, but you see forms and images and hairy biotypes in the circles of hell. So isn't that so similar to what we are reading? Back we go to before Andrew Jackson Davis. Swedenborg, 1688 to 1772. So we are talking here 1700s, beginning of 18th century. Was a mining engineer, an authority in metallurgy, physics, astronomy. He was an expert engineer. Since childhood, he was a clairvoyant medium. Arthur Conan Doyle, in his History of Spiritualism, Chapter 1, tells that he is the first of all modern men who has given a description of the process of death and of the world beyond. Let's journey together to his description. By the way, this is one of the covers of the book by Arthur Conan Doyle, and it's also easily found on the internet. I have it here. The History of Spiritualism, first published in 1926. He found that the other world, which we all go after that consisted of a number of different spheres, representing various shades of luminosity and happiness. Each of us go into that for which our spiritual condition has fitted us. How similar this is to the codification. Obviously, this vision of concentric sphere is not real. We know that they intersperse, that's a symbology, but it's the same that we have been seeing described so many times. He found houses in which families lived, temples, halls. That was made easy by the presence of celestial beings who helped the newcomer. Andrew Jackson Davis, André Luiz. This is being repeated. So I'm pretty sure we can expect to be received by people that we love when we discarnate. Such newcomers had an immediate period of complete rest. Codification talks about it, heaven and hell, first chapter of the second part. There were both angels and devils, but they were not of another order to ourselves. They were all human beings who had lived on earth, who were either undeveloped or highly developed. This is the codification, guys. We did not change in any way at that. Man lost nothing, was still a man. He took with him whatever modes of thought, beliefs, and prejudices that he had acquired. All children were received equally, whether baptized or not. Had Swedenborg lived 200 years ago, he probably would have been burned in a fire by the Inquisition by saying something like that. Children grew up in the other world. Young women mothered them, took care of them until the real mother came across. There was no eternal punishment. He was already talking about this. Those who were in the hells, plural, hells, places like the City of Justice, or similar, or that place in the Liberation book that you might have read, and I didn't bring it here, not to, too heavy, could work their way out if they wanted. Those in the heavens, they were working their way to something higher. There was marriage in the spirit world in the form of a spiritual union. This is the cover of one of the first editions. Read here, MDCCL 8, 1758. It's in Latin. De coelo ejus mirabilus, et de inferno ex auditis e vivis. From heaven and its miracles to hell, as I've heard and saw. He speaks of the architecture, the artisan's work, the flowers, fruits, scribes, embroidery, art, music, literature, science, schools, museums, colleges, libraries, and sports. Actually, this is the first reference I've ever heard of sports in the spirit world, but everything else we've read about. Are there sports in the spirit world? Well, that's an open question. I would need, additional support for that. Those who left this world old, renewed their youth, and gradually assumed their full vigors. We talked about this. Married couples continue together if their feelings towards each other were close and sympathetic. So we are seeing accounts from before the codification, totally coherent with many of the other reports we have. Back to the codification, Spirit's book, question 220. Will we always be reunited with our relatives and friends when we discarnate? That's a very good question. And the Spirit's book tells us that depends on how evolved they are and the path they are following. If one of them is more advanced and progresses more quickly, they don't remain together. We have seen this in Nosso Lar, in the Spirit's book, under Luiz and his mother, who is more advanced than him, or his father, who is a lot less advanced than him. Do our relatives and friends sometimes come to us to meet us when we leave the earth? Yes, they come to meet the soul they love. They congratulate it as though it were returning from a journey. It's a blessing granted to good spirits. Those who are blemished remain in isolation. That's what the codification tells us. This image shows Frederico Figner, who wrote books through Chico Xavier with the pseudonym of Brother Jacob. Here he is shown with two friends supporting him when he is discarnating, and his daughter that had, discarnated many years before. He was a very special case. He was allowed to be conscious during all his discarnation process. We are told that this doesn't happen very often. Brother Jacob, Frederico Figner, was born in Bohemia. That's part of the Czech Republic today. Actually, most of Czech Republic is Bohemia. He went to Brazil, became a prosperous businessman. He was very interested in technology. He is supposed to have brought the first phonographers to Brazil and travel around with them. But he became an active spiritist and worked in the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, attending to the people. You have to read the book that unfortunately has not been translated to English yet. Hey guys from the USSF, that's a good target. And the beginning is very, very interesting, but that's the subject of another talk about discarnation. We'll go later. He discarnates, he has the support of his daughter, of Bezerra de Menezes, someone else that I don't remember. He is taken to a spiritual city where his daughter lives. And those two paragraphs are from Brother Jacob. He is in her house, in the spiritual world. After a few moments, we found ourselves with my daughter in a comfortable living room. With emotion, I saw a family portrait adorned with flowers. So his daughter in the spiritual world had a family portrait. We don't know if it's a photo or a portrait, but images of his family. May we expect eventually to live in a city with family portraits around us? Isn't that a warming image? She informed to me the fate of almost all the bonds. This is the book. It's called Voltei, translation, I Am Back. I went a few chapters before when he's describing his arrival to that particular spiritual community. He mentions that initially the residential houses were widely separated. They were on a wide plain, and he could see that the housing was getting more dense. They were in the outskirts of a big city, of this new plan of this spiritual world where he is now. They were in an emergency spiritual colony situated on less elevated planes. That's our group. Later on, he goes and visits the institution in which his daughter worked. She worked in a university where a number of brothers and sisters guided and educated children and adolescents, preparing them for reincarnation in the planetary crust. Another account that supports that vision, that children when discarnate, most of us, or most of them, go to the spirit world as children, and they continue to grow there in their preparation process. Eventually, he returned to Rio, and I'm going to share with you what he tells us about his return. The return to Rio, and he means Rio de Janeiro, where he lived, moved him. He was not aware that the majority of those recently freed from the physical planet cannot move well. Him moved very, very well, so he was an exception. He noticed that they not arrived in the city like a rocket falling vertically from the sky, but with the naturalness of someone descending a staircase of vast steps. So similar to Andrew Jackson's description, isn't it? He continues, what amazed him was that most was the spiritual expression of each person that crossed his path. He observed that many creatures, such as in this picture here, this part of the picture, remained accompanied by benign spirits. But a number of entities followed other incarnated persons, closely following their victims, enjoying the lower sensations of physical life. His words. And we see that in our mediumistic meetings, don't we? Those spirits, they are the usual target of our work to help them, not to bother incarnated and to get on with their development process. Later on, he goes back to the spirit world where he's called to a meeting, and he is in this meeting. There's a swarm of questions here. Oh boy. And in this meeting, an old man who claimed to have been an assistant to his work while he was incarnated and working in the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, told him that many of those present were ethereal spirits that had been, the word evangelized could be oriented in the meetings that he had in the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. So can we expect, we that work while incarnated in this, when we discarnate, to meet spirits that we have oriented while here? Isn't that great as well? It's neat. Wow. I don't know if people still use neat, but that's my generation word. And he continues. Most of them had been brought from multiple places in order to work together again. So he was being teamed up with errant spirits to do the same similar work that he did while incarnated in the Spiritist meetings, and now he will do the same work discarnated. He embraced his companions and told them that, they would not be working with him, but rather that he, Brother Jacob, would be their collaborator. But the concept is great, isn't it? And final slides on this book. He goes back to Rio with his team to do the work, and he reports that this was my first dialogue after discarnation with a spirit deviated from the good. So here he is, supported, and here's the spirit he's talking to. This is also from Projeto Imagem. My brother, he said to him, why don't you decide to free our sick friend who's already so miserable? And the spirit answers, and you, not even after being dead, do you give up bothering me? Yes, I don't give up because I want to be your friend. I want to bring your spirit to light. And it goes on. So after discarnation, he met a spirit he tried to orient it, or he had oriented in the past, and now discarnated, he's doing the same with the same spirit. The work goes on. Back to the codification, and I will be on time. Don't be afraid, Daniel. Time is under control. Question 257 is a long essay in the Spirit's book regarding the spirit world. So go there and read it. And I bring from this particular essay this part that reminds us that the suffering that we undergo when we discarnate is a result from the manner in which we have lived on earth. Of course, we will not experience gout or rheumatism, but we will experience maybe sufferings of a different kind. They tell us that this link with matter is very important. Minimizing, disconnecting the influence from the matter help us to have fewer painful sensations. And they advise us, and there's no picture here because I wanted everything in a single slide. All of those, they are advices to us. So the codification tell me, starting with my present life, it depends on my spirit, on my soul, because the suffering, because I have free will. And I have the ability to choose to act or not. To choose to break free from the influence of matter. I have the ability to conquer my animal passions. I have the choice to entertain no hatred, no envy, no jealousy, nor pride. I have the ability to cease to be dominated by selfishness. I have the will to be able to purify myself through good sentiments. I have the possibility of choosing to practice the good and not to give to the things of this world any more importance than they actually deserve. Thereby, even while incarnated, I will have been purifying myself by detaching from matter. And when, and this will happen to me, to you, to all of us, when we leave the body behind, we will not suffer any longer much from its influence. Good advice. The physical sufferings we underwent while incarnated will leave no painful memory or disagreeable impression, because those affected only the body. The spirit, our spirit, if we behave as recommended, will be happy to be relieved of those things of the body, and our peaceful conscience will exempt us from all mental anguish. I hope that's reconforting to you. To me, it is. Those guys, those are the books we visited. We introduced excerpts from all of them. The Spirit's book, Planetary Transition, Divine Comedy, Heaven and Hell, Astral City, Nosso Lar, in part 1. And in part 2, Between Heaven and Earth, Crianças no Além, History of Spiritualism, The Great Harmonia, On the Way to a World of Regeneration, and Voltaire. So we have journeyed together to 11 books. That's through 11 books. That's a very, very, very small part. But on the other hand, we were able to journey together through 11 books. And you might now have the task of rereading those 11 books. I believe I have skipped one in my... No, it's there. And a final slide, and this is actually the final slide. I was curious. My mother once made a list of all the spiritual colonies. And through this journey, we talked about and we heard testimony on at least 7 spiritual colonies. Colônia Redenção and a Jewish spirit community that was named from planetary transition, Nosso Lar from Astral City, Lar da Bênção from Between Heaven and Earth, On the Way to a World of Regeneration presented us to a colony in the Amazon and to the City of Justice, and Voltaire, where Brother Jacob told us about the emergency spiritual colony where his daughter was, as an errant spirit. So we journeyed to 7 spiritual colonies. Fantastic, isn't it? Thank you so much for being here with me on this journey. I hope you have enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. And if there are any questions, it would be a pleasure to try to address them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luiz. That was a very enlightening of you. And throughout the presentation, there were several moments and some of those questions came up. I would like to start with one that always touches me as a parent. So can you tell us, why do children disincarnate, especially some at a very young age? If you could comment on that, that'd be great.
I would love to have the wisdom to be able to reply to that in an enlightened way. As far as I know, part of our journeys are predetermined, and many of the spirits that discarnate young, uh, have this happen because it was in their plan for this incarnation, something they had to finish, something they had to conclude from the former incarnation. I have been explained that many times, but I'm not pretty sure I 100% agree with that. Uh, Obviously, there's the law of destruction, that things have to go away so new things have to come. But that's also too generic. We know it hurts very much those that remain to survive their children and the young ones that go. I also have heard this explanation that their departure might be tied with the incarnation plan of their parents or one of their parents. But I do not have a definitive answer to that. It's also something that, breaks my heart. And maybe when we discarnate, we'll get a good explanation of that. Who knows?
Yeah. No, but it's always good to know that life goes on. And,
Yes.
unfortunately, the people that go through that process, it must be like really, really painful. But we have the blessing of Spiritism that tells us life continues, and we at least can have that comfort that we're going to meet those people again, like you described throughout your presentation there. Another very curious, yeah, go ahead.
On that, I remember like 3 weeks ago, close to that, I was orienting spirits in a mediumistic section, and something that doesn't often happen. A child came about, I would imagine, probably around 8 or 9, and he was okay. He was very well, and we were able to, guide them through to other spirits that were gonna go on helping them. So I think all this is very warming to us to know that they are cared for and they have a continuity. We suffer here, but they are okay there. We suffer with their absence. But also from children, from Crianças no Além, we see that we must be very careful not to bother them with our feelings of loss. We should be okay, wish them the best, obviously have good memories, but do not keeping, annoying them with our lower feelings.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for this added explanation. You also brought a lot of references from spiritualism, Andrew Jackson Davis. I mean, we understand Spiritism started with the sisters back in upstate New York. I mean, there's a lot of Spiritism that's similar to spiritualism, but would you be able to comment where do they divert? Like, how different is the Spiritism from spiritualism? If you can touch on that.
Sure. It's important for us to know that there are a number of phenomena in the universe, and they are there, like fire and light and photons. So mediunity, no, this is not an invention from Spiritism. Mediunity has been around us for tens of thousands of years. The continuity of life, this is not being invented by Spiritism. The spirit world is not invented by Spiritism, it's there. Spiritism is a doctrine. Spiritism is something that a very small number of spirits around 1850, 1860, that decided to share their view of the universe with us. And they used Allan Kardec for this. So it is this doctrine that we call Spiritism, that we study in the codification. That's something that has been shared to us by very enlightened spirits, and we kind of say, okay, we like it. It makes sense to us. I want to be good. Spiritualism is something much larger on the sense that it tries to address most of those phenomena in different ways, and it embraces many different doctrines and views that relate to those phenomena that have been with us for so long and are not specific to Spiritism. So you could say that Spiritism is something that's inside the Spiritualism as a whole, as are other things of different characteristics and qualities, and sometimes with slightly different beliefs. I hope I don't know if I have been clear enough, but that's my understanding of those differences.
All right.
There's a lot of discussion if Arthur Conan Doyle was a spiritist or a spiritualist. He is, if you go into the introduction of this particular book, it's mentioned that he was a, what's the word? I have to read it. Give me 2 seconds. That he was president d'honneur de la Fédération Spirit Internationale. Spirit. So he was a president of honor of the International Spiritist Federation. I've read the newspaper article from after he died, just after he died, that named him as an spiritist, as saying, I truly believe that I am a spiritist now, not any spiritualist. So a lot of discussion, but that's academic. For us, what we want, is to study and learn and do our best here so that we can evolve and go to the spirit world, hopefully to a nice place that will prepare us for our next challenge and then on. I think this is the important part.
Awesome. Thank you very much again, Luis, for being here and bringing us that awesome piece of information that you did. I'd also like to thank everyone that watched us today here for all the questions and comments that we got in our social media. I'd like to remind you, we're going to have another session next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And as we're about to end our live today, I'd like to remind everyone again of the upcoming 16th U.S. Spiritist Symposium on November 5th in Houston, Texas. Make sure you register all your family. Like I said in the beginning, it's a fun day of learning about Spiritism and reconnecting. So it's really great, and we're going to take that opportunity to celebrate the 25th years of the United States Spiritist Federation. And also, don't miss tomorrow, Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, our next class of the Initiation into Spiritism course. And please let us know if you guys have any questions about it. And just before we finish, Luis, would you be able to guide us in a prayer to close the day today, please?
Sure. Let's thank our mentors, the mentors of our spirit houses as well, for the opportunity of us being here, journeying together through all those books and having the opportunity of learning from them, even online. Let us thank all those spirits that took the time and labor to share their thoughts with us. So thank you, Manoel, Philomeno de Miranda. Thank you, André Luiz. Thank you, Brother Jacob. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, all of you, for helping us with that. And we should thank also the incarnate spirits that maybe are not incarnate anymore or not, but that also have dedicated so much of your time and your energy to helping us. So thank you, Chico Xavier. Thank you, Ivone Pereira. Thank you, Andrew Jackson Davis. Thank you, Swandenborg. And so many others. Divaldo, Franco, I could not mention him namely. We should ask our mentors to help us incorporate in our day-to-day lives what we study and what we learn, so that we can become better persons, serious spiritists. We also should thank those who have watched this presentation now and later, discarnated spirits who did that, probably here, around me, around you, and those incarnated that watch this talk as well. So thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Antonio Cordeiro. Thank you, Clarete. Thank you, Yasko. And all those others who haven't sent a message. Take care. Be well. Do your best.